So Ellie, can I just first start by asking whether you believe enough is done to support students in Scotland?
I think it's really clear that enough isn't being done at the moment. We're seeing right now record rates of student homelessness. We found last year 12% of students had been homeless at some point in their studies. That same survey also found that about a third of students were considering dropping out of their studies because of financial pressures. So very clearly, the system isn't working right now for students. Very clearly, there isn't enough financial support. And actually, that was before this cost of living crisis. Things have got worse in the past year. And we've actually seen no additional support being offered to help students deal with that. So we know that the situation has actually got worse quite significantly over the past year, just in terms of the real terms cut to student support payments that the students have been facing. It's worth saying, that the Scottish Government have offered things like discretionary funds, hardship funds, but it's really not enough in terms of, first of all, a lot of students find actually just the challenge of applying for those discretionary funds can actually be really inaccessible. If you're a student who is really stressed, really worried about your financial situation, maybe you're working, 20, 30 hours a week, a part-time job on top of your full-time studies, just to be able to pay the bills, and you still don't have enough money, and you're having to fill out all of these different forms to get that hardship fund. You're having to submit all of this different evidence, having to send your university or your college bank statements that show every single purchase you've made over the past couple of months. That can be really dehumanizing for some students, and actually just the sheer time that takes to send that application off is time that actually is students who have got assignments and coursework and part-time jobs all to be worrying about. And it means that a lot of students won't apply for those funds because they're just not accessible for them. Not only that, but of course, it's also worth mentioning that you've got international students, for instance, who aren't eligible for those funds. Previously, if you're an EU student, you were treated as a home student, you were eligible, you're not anymore after Brexit. So things have just got worse and worse and worse. And it means that students are struggling to stay afloat, and there's absolutely nothing really being done to keep us afloat and stop us from drowning.
Well, the UK government, they announced an extra 50 million that will be made to help support student hardships, and 2.3 million pounds is made available to support students' mental health in Wales. I'm interested to know whether you think Scotland is now falling behind when it comes to student support in the UK during the cost of living crisis.
I mean, actually, it's really clear that Scotland is falling behind. Scotland is doing worse than any of the other nations in the UK at the moment. You can look at the stats that you just gave, but you can also look at the fact that, and I don't have the exact statistics, but they're available online. But in Wales, in England, actually the amount of student support payments that you get as part of your maintenance loan or maintenance grants has gone up. Not at the same rate as inflation. It's not an inflationary increase, but they have increased them somewhat. I think in England it's something like 3-4%, but like I say, it is online. In Scotland, it's 0%, nothing, absolutely zilch, no increase whatsoever. And actually, I think if you look at the Scottish government, and you look at what they're doing, and you look at the fact that actually the Conservative government in Westminster is actually doing better than them in terms of the support. And now look, I think there's a discussion to be had in terms of grants, loans, things like that. I think, certainly at NUS, we'd be calling on the Scottish government to increase grants and bursaries rather than maintenance loans, which is obviously what's been done in England, and I think in Wales as well. But actually, we're in a situation right now where students are struggling so much that we really will take any support that we can get, because if you've got students who are at risk of dropping out because they just can't afford to live, as a student, then I would much rather that they're offered the option of being able to take out an additional maintenance loan than the current situation, which is that there's no support available at all.
And just to finish off, what is, it's maybe hard to say, but what is either one or two things that you think that the Scottish Government should absolutely be primarily focusing on going forward? What is it that you would call for them to focus on right now?
Well, I think in the short term, in the very short term, I think we need to see urgent increases in the student finance packages that students receive from the Scottish Government through SAS. That needs to be for colleges and universities. That's really important as well. We know that actually college students are disproportionately impacted at the moment by the cost of living crisis. We need to see an urgent increase. And that's really, really important. I think it's also important the Scottish Government needs to make it so that the discretionary funds that are available, like I say, there's plenty of issues with those, but they can be a big lifeline for those who are really struggling. But there's a number of students who aren't eligible for them. And it's not just international students, actually. Students who, I heard a story from a student at a college in Glasgow who she's married and her husband is controlling and isn't letting her have, isn't giving her money, isn't allowing her access to funds, and she wanted to apply for discretionary funding, but because just to be able to help get by, but because her household income, she apparently, because she's married, she's got that. Apparently, she was ineligible. She wasn't able to obtain that. We need to really look at eligibility criteria that needs to come from both the Scottish Government and from institutions themselves. And I think finally, I think the other really urgent thing for the Scottish Government right now is that we know that because of the horrendous situation of student poverty, that's having a massive impact on student mental health as well. And for a really long time, the Scottish Government has been funding really, doing some excellent work funding mental health counsellors in universities and colleges to support students who are really struggling with their mental health. And that funding, it doesn't look like it's going to be continuing after this academic year. In fact, they've not even confirmed what the funding is going to be from April until the end of this academic year. I think this is a horrifying situation. It looks like the Scottish Government is going to be withdrawing that funding entirely and expecting colleges and universities to fund the counsellors themselves, but at the same time is issuing those colleges and universities with a significant real terms cut to their own budgets. So I think it's a really worrying situation. The Scottish Government needs to absolutely prioritise the funding for these counsellors. Otherwise, I think that students are going to be at an increased risk of dropping out or worse.